Think about a typical modern morning, pouring a simple bowl of cereal, sipping a hot cup of tea, or slipping on a pair of high heels before heading out the door. It feels perfectly domestic, but these objects were not engineered for our comfort. If we trace the family tree of the items sitting on a kitchen table or stored in a hallway closet, we find a lineage built on state-sanctioned espionage, battlefield tactics, and medical horror. The modern home serves as a gallery for these sanitized nightmares, preserving a history of brutal, utilitarian design behind its walls. Take the chainsaw. Today, it sits in the garage, synonymous with lumberjacks and forestry, but its origins lie in the late 18th century surgical ward. Before the advent of modern C-sections, childbirth complications were often lethal. To replace the small, slow knives used at the time, if a baby was stuck in the birth canal, doctors resorted to a symphysiotomy, cutting the mother's pelvic bone. Scottish doctors invented a hand-cranked device with a flexible, serrated chain to cleave through bone with maximum speed to save lives. While surgeons addressed the mechanics of the pelvis, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg sought to govern the body through the contents of its stomach. Operating a famous sanitarium in Michigan in the late 1800s, Kellogg was convinced that rich, flavorful foods inflamed the libido. To enforce moral purity, he sought an anaphrodisiac, a substance that actively suppresses sexual desire. His medical intervention was a deliberately bland, unstimulating diet. He baked and flaked wheat and corn into dry, tasteless pieces, prescribing them specifically to stop his patients from masturbating. Devices engineered to forcibly dictate human biology, whether by tearing through a pelvis or neutralizing the sex drive, have been repackaged into garage hardware and morning nourishment. Beyond physical control, everyday items were built to project tactical power. In 10th century Persia, the heeled boot was engineered for mounted soldiers. The pronounced heel was designed to hook directly into stirrups. This structural anchor allowed cavalrymen to stand fully upright on galloping horses, stabilizing them so they could fire bows and arrows with lethal accuracy. When Persian diplomats traveled west, European aristocrats eagerly adopted the footwear. Because 17th century streets were unpaved and muddy, wearing an elevated, highly impractical shoe proved the wearer was exempt from manual labor. The ultimate flex of this status symbol came from King Louis XIV, who decreed that only members of his royal court were permitted to wear shoes with red heels, instantly identifying their privilege. A similar spatial display of wealth occurred right outside the manor. The manicured lawn originated in the Middle Ages as a functional military clearing, a swath of ground kept free of trees so sentries could spot enemies approaching the castle walls. By the 18th century, English lords had twisted these defensive perimeters into vast green extravaganzas. Maintaining low-cut grass before the invention of the mechanical mower required armies of laborers wielding scythes. It was a deliberate display of land waste, showing the owner could afford to ignore agricultural production. Tactical combat assets and defensive military zones were intentionally twisted into elite status symbols designed to flaunt unproductive privilege. Society's pursuit of color and comfort demanded a different toll, often at the direct expense of human life. In 19th century England, homes were plastered in Scheele's green, a vibrant, arsenic-based copper pigment. When exposed to dampness, this wallpaper released lethal gas. Yet industrial leaders like designer William Morris actively dismissed the mounting medical evidence of arsenic poisoning as a hoax to protect their profits. Shortly after, the fashion world was swept by mauvine measles, a craze sparked by an 18-year-old chemist named William Perkin, who accidentally discovered the first synthetic purple dye while trying to cure malaria. Perkin quickly scaled his operation, but the exact methods of his commercial synthesis were fiercely guarded as trade secrets to outmaneuver intense international competition. This culture of industrial secrecy was matched by the botanical theft orchestrated by Robert Fortune. The British East India Company hired him to steal the heavily guarded trade secrets of the Chinese tea industry. Disguised as a merchant, Fortune smuggled thousands of living tea plants out of China's interior using Wardian cases, early miniature glass greenhouses. This heist broke the Qing dynasty's absolute monopoly, transferring massive economic wealth directly to the British Empire. The comforting aesthetics of the Victorian home, from the wallpaper to the teacup, were built upon a foundation of industrial denial, secret chemistry, and state-sponsored corporate espionage. The fact that none of this feels familiar today is not an accident. Normalcy is manufactured through strategic rebranding, actively erasing brutal origins from public memory. When W.K. Kellogg realized his brother's anti-masturbatory cereal had massive commercial potential, he initiated a bitter legal split. He added sugar, stripped away the anti-libido medical claims, and marketed the flakes as a cheerful, nutritious family breakfast. This sanitization continues every time we step outside. Modern homeowners associations enforce strict regulations mandating monoculture grass, effectively penalizing residents who attempt to grow productive gardens. The aesthetic of medieval aristocratic land waste is now a legally binding neighborhood standard. Normalcy is rarely an inherent trait of an object or a place. It is the result of an invention outliving its darker purpose, shedding its past, and being optimized for mass profit. The next time you pour a bowl of cereal or look at your grass, remember that you are interacting with tools originally forged for a much more visceral purpose.